DIO。
ほう、向かってくるのか。逃げずにこのディオに近づいてくるのか。せっかく祖父のジョセフが私のザワールドの正体を試験終了チャイム直前まで問題を解いている受験生のような必死こいた気分で教えてくれたというのに。
近づかなきゃてめえをぶちのめせないんでな。
ほほう。では十分近づくがよい。
Exceedance, an act or instance of exceeding, especially a limit or amount. And does Emporio live up to the title of being the destined one of exceedance? Well, let's see. Unlike the grade 0 right line, which can be replaced in a progress, the grade 1 right line is very important since it's the only way for DIO to get his very important token set of the Vanguard system called Exceed. Exceed is the reason why DIO, which is what I'll be calling him, more unique compared to the other destined ones. The first effect of Exceed locks you from riding into any other grade trees other than Emporio in this name, and also giving us access to the auto mod gauge. Its other effects is basically letting us play Vanguard 0, where whenever a card is put to our damage zone during an opponent's turn, we choose a card from drop and put it face up as an auto mod gauge. Then, if a Triolet's gauge, if the card put to damage is not a trigger, our Vanguard gets plus 5000 power. But if we have 4 more gauge, our Vanguard gets plus 5000 power regardless of what card is put to damage, effectively making our trigger at plus 15k. It's a really cool gimmick for DIO, and it can technically slow down rush decks just a little bit, but we do still need cards in drop in order to gain the gauge, which is a little bit annoying, especially in the early game where we're having at most 1 to 2 cards in drop from discarding the right, or from card effects such as Habitable Zone, making us having to cut some attacks early on just for us to take the damage to build up the gauge. Not only that, in the late game where we're about 4 to 5 damage, we can't really take more attacks, especially against decks that have 2 crit bots or decks that, or just Zoga. Side note, hitting a defensive OT will not get you a gauge since the OT is not placed to the damage zone as it's removed on damage check. And as per ruling, you damage check first, put the card to the damage zone, then choose a card from drop and it becomes a gauge. After all of that, then the cards from the Garden Circle are retired. This ruling makes it so that we cannot purposefully guard for 0 to pass just to build our drop, just for us to take the damage to build up the gauge. For the grade 2 right line, we have Dora's Aviola, which has a really simple skill where when written upon by a grade 3 with Emporio in its name, we gauge the top card of our deck, and we may put a gauge to our hand. It's technically a free +1 to our hand, but usually you wouldn't want to add a card from gauge to hand since you want to have as much gauge as possible, since most of the support cards or the better ones usually requires about 4 to 5 gauges, and the Vanguard itself scales where the more gauges you have, the stronger our board becomes. Now for his first skill is Act V. Once per turn, counter +1. Choose a card from our drop and it becomes an auto mod gauge face up. Look at the top 5 cards of our deck, choose a grade 3 or lower from among them and call it to real. Shuffle our deck. Then it gives itself the red text for the turn, continuous V. For every 2 of auto mod gauge, it gives our front row plus 5000 power. It's a really good skill. It filters, it costs a card to board, and it also gives power to front row just for CB. And like I just said, DIO scales quite a bit, which is why you want to have as much gauge as possible. As the more damage he takes, the longer the game goes on, he gets more gauge, and the more gauge he gets, the more power he gives. Unlike a certain Flame Dragon, where despite his title of being the destined one of skills, he doesn't scale as much. Next, we have DIO's Divine Skill, Act V if one's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and we have 4 more auto mod gauge. Counter +1, discard a card from hand, drive +2 and critical +1 for the turn. Just like his title implies, DIO breaks through his limits and opponents with 4 drives and 2 crits. It's simple, it's decent, but it's very easily countered with a PG, so you gotta be careful on how you use the Divine Skill. Or you just, spam the skill the moment you can and just get the hand size and grind through the game. Compared to the other cards with divine skill, Dio's skills of underwhelming. I mean, yes, it sort of represents the title of Exceedance, but there's still a lot of other ways to show that. It could have, make him resend a full board or something, I don't know. But it does, however, make Dio slightly more original this way and not just a full board resend or another Overlord clone. Now, let's go into the support card. First, with the triple rare Flying Conversion Wingster. Continuous rear, during our turn, if you have 2 or more automatic gauge, he gets plus 5000 power. If you have more, he doesn't lose drive checks via card effects. If that wasn't obvious enough, his second skill, Auto Rear, when this unit attacks, if you have 4 more automatic gauge and the rear guard did not drive check this turn, counter plus 1, this unit performs drive checks and drive minus 1. At the end of the battle, bind this unit. It's a really good card, where on turn 3, you just 4 automatic gauge, he's sitting for about 28k and a single drive. But if you have on turn 4, and we have 8 more automatic gauge, sitting for about 38k with twin drive. And since you don't use hand for him to get a drive, you technically plus in hand. However, true to his name, he does fly away after he attacks with the drive. But incorporating this with Dio's divine skill, on your 8 automatic gauge turn, you're doing 6 drive checks in 1 turn. And honestly, for a deck that doesn't really stand Vanguard, doing 6 drives in 1 turn is honestly very impressive. Except just don't hit 6 blanks, or else you'll just shake hands with opponent and just go home. Next, we have the double rare Nebulite Invoke Dragon, which only isn't a grade 1 80k booster, but a 10k grade 2, where on attack, so plus 1, gets plus 5000 power. If you have 5 or more automatic gauge, plus 15k instead. And its second skill, Continuous Garden Circle, if you have 4 more automatic gauge, it gets plus 15k shield. Nebula Invoke is our main secondary beater, since he himself is already a 25k beater on 5 or more automatic gauge turn alone, but with Vanguard's effect, it makes him 25k minimum. The second skill is also really good as well, as it makes Nebula Invoke a 20k shield, which is really great for both guarding from hand and intercept, as well as one of the best target for Floodgate Buster Barrage, as choosing it and another grade 2, you simply make it a 35k card with just one single card. And lastly, Dio has 2 more support cards, both of which are grade 1 that doesn't really do too much, but they are useful, I guess. First, we have Spacewalk Dragon, where end of the battle it boosts. If you have 2 more automatic gauge, put him to so, we can retire 1 opposing grade 1 or low rear guard. The retiring effect is just kind of redundant, since most of the important grade 1s nowadays usually don't stick around too much, but at times I guess it can be useful against certain decks like Rezile to cure off the Aerial Sage, I guess. But the most important thing is pretty much the sending him to soul part, but at that point we might as well just use Bore Mind instead. And lastly, we have Gather Gather oh, just going Gather. He's just an 80k booster or attacker on our turn if we have 4 more automatic gauge. And yeah, that's kind of it. Simple, sweet, and pretty decent in our opinion. With that, we have looked through all of Dio's cards in support. Dio itself is very similar to Seraph Pure Light and Geneva, but it doesn't do as much, simply because he doesn't multi-attack and his scaling gimmick isn't as good compared to the other 2. Pure Light scales based on the number of cards in prison, which they can accelerate it with Card Spring and Acute Markerite. And the scaling also gives the front row an extra critical if there's 10 more cards in prison, and as well as them having a new card which allows them access to 4 to 5 attacks with 2 critical. While Geneva on the other hand scales based on the number of face down cards in his bind zone, which builds up really fast simply because of his support that either binds for cost or as part of the effect. And just like Seraph, they also have access to multi-attack with Elfrak, which binds itself to cost something from the top 5 of the deck. However, I will say one thing, is that Dio's scaling is definitely more consistent compared to the other 2, as it is not heavily reliant on having your rear guards to help accelerate the build-up, which is one of the weaknesses for Pure Light and Geneva, as if they do not see their pieces, they cannot scale as well. The pros for Dio is that you're making big power as well as having the power of Vanguard 0 and multiple try-check in a single turn. Compared to the others, it's very consistent, granted if your opponent attacks you and you know when to take the damage. Decent hand size, high power attacks, and lots of drive pressuring, making Dio just as if not even scarier compared to Seraph and Geneva. For his weakness, this is a very CB heavy deck, where in the late game, If you drive your CC, you'll run out of gas very soon, and you won't be able to hit as hard as the rate text effect is locked behind a CB1, as well as with Wingster's drive skill. Another weakness is the reliance on taking hits from your opponent in order to scale. It's a cool gimmick, as the more you take damage, the more power you gain during their turn, the harder is it for your opponent to hit you, and the more power you gain during your turn. But there's two downsides. One, your opponent damages you in the early game, stopping you from getting engaged early on, making you unable to do a high power and drive pressure in your first retreat turn. Second is in the late game, where your opponent has a board filled with 2 crit attackers or even 5 damage, making you unable to take any more damage, and your scaling will slow down by a lot, as the only other card that can gain engage is I really hope that Bullshit will give DIO a dedicated CC support in the future. A CC similar to Area Sage will definitely benefit a deck in the long game, granted you're not up against a deck with removal of course. But I can see Bullshit giving him a card that either help with accelerating gauge, or a card that can resend or gain crit. Giving DIO a resender or a card that can give or gain crit will make use of the deck's high power gain to its fullest potential, or a gauge accelerator will just, help with the scaling. For the deck list, this here is the current list I'm running. Like I always say, my deck is not optimal, but it's a build that I'm comfortable with. But it can be used as a decent skeleton for those who want to build the deck and can change it up to suit their own playstyle. Or just deal from the topping list. Overall, DIO is a really fun deck, and despite its weaknesses, it's still a very solid high tier 3 to mid tier 2 deck. I really hope Bushi doesn't screw up with support like how they did to my boy Rezael. So, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!
Watch out, fire, fire 心の芯のとこ燃えし right now 色褪せないもの never ever never